HASTA NAKSHATRA is about mastery over the physical plane, and with that mastery, being able to overcome your enemies. HASTA NAKSHATRA is about mastery over the physical plane, and with that mastery, being able to overcome your enemies. The deity is the rising sun, the sun being your consciousness, your awareness, being awake. So conscious awareness over the physical plane and the metaphysical plane. The symbol is a closed fist, so the control, the grasp, the mastery that you have. And Virgo is the harvest, always what you're looking toward. So mastery over the physical plane, the control you have, the mastery that you've developed, and always taking action with an eye toward the harvest. And in the meantime, looking around at who's trying to stop you, who's trying to impede your progress, and having mastery to be able to counter those attacks. Now, Hasta, as related to the hand. It's the use of the hand for spiritual purposes. Because Hasta is Virgo, Virgo is very practical, it's very terrestrial, it's very esotericism, not for the sake of esotericism, but esotericism because you can use it. So it's very concerned about the practical application of the spiritual. So relating it to magic, it's something like a video like this, about engaging with spiritual acts so that there is some type of tangible spiritual result, or engaging with spiritual knowledge so that other people can use it. So focused on spirituality, but with tangible material results that are brought into the world. Mercury is also associated with writing that you do with the hand. So the hand becomes the magical instrument in which spirit comes into the world. In the case of duality, for a low Hasta expression, spirituality is ignored because it cannot be defined. It cannot be explained or quantified. It doesn't fit into the box of science, and therefore it is disregarded. You'll see this in the work of Jordan Peterson, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Maher, where they're always looking to say this or that. They're looking to discredit people who have religious points of view that cannot be explained through science. Now, from a spiritual perspective, this is Kali, liberation. Kali cuts off the heads. In a spiritual sense, liberation comes from separating from the rational mind and understanding that the material plane and the metaphysical plane are different. Symbols and words do have meanings that are beyond rational explanation, and oftentimes there's something that are experiential. So they're really beyond explanation, because if you have not experienced them, there's really no way to convince you. But this material duality, it speaks to the precise letter of the subject versus the spirit of the subject, the meaning of the subject. So for people who do live this kind of life, navigating their way through worldly and material conversations is very difficult because nobody understands what they're talking about unless you too have had that experience. But you can't explain it, you can't rationalize it, you can't make it make sense to somebody who doesn't understand it. This is the duality of Hasta, expressed through Hasta, but then this is also the conflict that a person on a spiritual path experiences. Hasta is trickster energy. Trickster is Mercury. And Mercury, remember, is Hermes, Thoth, Loki. It's the deity who has the ability to go up into the heavens and down into the underworld. So underworld, terrestrial plane, and with the gods. So the full spectrum. And with the full spectrum of information, imagine what you can do with that perspective. Virgo is ruled by Mercury, and then Hasta is ruled by Moon, and Moon is your mentality, it's your emotions. So you have somebody with the broadest spectrum available, somebody who's really able to tap into all levels of information and can manipulate your emotions. So let's resume the discussion of duality in terms of criminal and politician. So the trickster energy enjoys lying to people. The trickster energy is happy when it gets something over on you because it knows more things than you know. And with that knowledge, it is able to manipulate you for material gain. Hasta is also associated with laughing, but they're not laughing with you. They're laughing in the way that builds rapport, or they're laughing in the way like they got something over on you. Think about Goodfellas. It's the characteristics that build rapport, that mimic your traits, and all of the things that make you feel comfortable, right? So this set of street smarts, that it's not really about your intelligence, but it's about the perception of your intelligence. So you always allude to the idea that you know more. In media and in movies, this is expressed with the cop versus the criminal. The criminal who cuts corners and gets a lot of material gain for something that he didn't actually work for it, versus the cop who has this very hard life because he does follow the rules and he does do the things that you're supposed to do. Now, let's apply that duality when it comes to leaders and the people who elect them. Remember, leaders are put in office because the common people put them there. And common people put them there because of the perception that the leaders have projected through their campaigning. So leaders are elected by common people, and the common people don't actually know these people. They're elected based on an impression, and the impression based on what their campaign was like. That's why campaign messaging is a really big business. But what happens is that the leaders will pretend to associate with the common man, with the common plight, and the leaders will hold up these systems with the idea of, look, I made it, but they don't actually live like the people they elected. So, for example, healthcare. What the healthcare of elected people looks like versus the healthcare of the people are entirely different. They'll negotiate you a deal, but they don't want the deal they negotiated for you. They want a good deal. So it's just being very hypocritical, and they are actually very far removed from the life that they are pretending like they empathize with. So you don't have any money, but they have plenty of money. And they're very fixated on manipulating people to obtain power over them. And it pleases them to obtain power over them. This is all Hasta. Here's a list of some Hasta natives, just so you get the idea. Joseph Mengele, Joseph Stalin, Vladimir Putin, Margaret Thatcher, Fidel Castro, George Bush Sr., George Bush Jr., and Donald Trump. So all people who are very cold and calculating and feign empathy with a larger group to gain power over that group, when the reality is that their life looks nothing like your life. And how they maintain these structures is by stressing the inner strength that you need to fight through life. As in, again, I got here, so if you fight hard enough, if you persevere long enough, you can get here too. So they're going to really stick with the rules of the system, and this is a very Hasta. They really emphasize the rules of the system, and they really de-emphasize, really suppress any type of metaphysical thought or spirituality, because that's not within the rules of the system. A very blatant example of this was after the 9/11 attacks in the United States, when people were really looking for leadership. George Bush told them, go shopping, it will help the economy. And the problem that occurs is that this manipulation upholds systems that don't actually work for the people. That's the conflict element of Hasta. That's the problem with the manipulation, is that it's a promise of what could happen, but it isn't the reality of what could happen. So you indeed are being manipulated by by people who are taking advantage of resources that are not available to you. So in your own life, when you are making these distinctions, and you have in mind where you think you are supposed to be, or what type of mastery you should have, like in a material sense, everybody's got a different playing field. They're not level. But Hasta energy wants you to believe that they are level. Another group, besides criminals and politicians that have many, many, many Hasta natives, are spiritualists. And spiritualists are those who perform mediumship of the dead. So they communicate with terrestrial spirits. And what spiritualists were very concerned about is evidence. So they have what's called evidentiary mediumship. From turn of the century, there was ectoplasm, there were seances, but they're very concerned with what is produced materially because they were trying to bridge that duality. And here's what happens, right? Because material is not the same as spiritual. So for example, when you get a reading from an evidentiary-based medium, the medium is very concerned with names, dates, items, places, right? So stuff to legitimize their ability to speak with the dead, versus the spiritual utility of that services is to be able to bring comfort to the living. Criminal element. Imagine if you have mastery over the material world, you understand how people think, then on top of that, you have psychic abilities. Then you can read minds, you can read energy, you can communicate with the dead. So they can read people in the first place, but then they're tapped into all of these other areas. If you're going to have somebody properly scam you, that's a good way to do it. So that's why we think about politicians being corrupt, we think about doctors and their malpractice and they don't really care about us. And the same goes for fake psychics or people trying to take advantage of you. Those people exist, and Hasta is the place where they exist. So these stereotypes that we use socially, that's one of the distinctions of Hasta, is know the difference. I'm going to tell you parallel stories from two HASTA moons. One is a TV series, one is real life. The first one is Better Call Saul. In the US, Breaking Bad was a really big TV show, and the lawyer for the drug dealer in it was called Saul. So Better Call Saul is how he came to be a lawyer for criminals. And what happened is Saul was a criminal and then decided to turn his life around. He took a correspondence course, became a lawyer, worked really hard, practiced really good law. In the series, his work was comparable to the very big practices. Like, he practiced legitimately good law, like found things that other people missed. He really honed his skill. He was really good at it. But the problem was that the lawyers wouldn't have him in their practice. He couldn't get ahead because they would never see him as a lawyer. So regardless of what level his skill was, the perception was that he was a slimy lawyer. So they wouldn't hire him. So the guy could never get ahead. He could never do anything. So he had to leave the system of the lawyers and be a lawyer to criminals. But again, skill versus perception. The second example is Meghan Markle, who's also HASTA moon. She's a person who made a career, who was financially stable, and then met somebody who was wealthy. And she didn't start out saying, I'm going to break this family apart. She tried for years to be part of the family. She tried for years to be part of this structure. And what happened? She got discredited. She doesn't come from a good family. She wasn't really well educated. She's the wrong color. Regardless of how smart she is, regardless of how resourceful she is, regardless of what she actually has to offer, the problem is perception. They will never see her as a royal. And she knew that, and so she left. The way that spirituality is expressed in the physical world is not because God or some deity comes here to do it. No, it's because we tap in through prayer, through meditation, through our different extrasensory perception abilities, aka your intuition, your psychic abilities, your telepathy, any of your clairs. But you do that, you tap in so that you get the knowledge that's around you and you get guidance on how you can find a situation or put yourself into a situation where you will learn the things that you need to learn. You will develop the skills to go about your spiritual path, and also you will find yourself encountering situations in which to express these skills. There's a quote by Marcus Aurelius. He says, the obstacle becomes the way. So as you're going through your life, all the things that don't work out in a linear sense, where you think you're supposed to go and what you think is supposed to happen, when those things don't work out, other things in the meantime are working out. So where you thought you were supposed to be, you're not there, but you're in some other situation and you're learning some other skill, which had you been over here, you wouldn't be learning this. And this is the thing that you truly needed. In terms of duality, this is a really frustrating situation for somebody with low HASTA trying to figure out, because it's not something that makes worldly sense, but it makes spiritual sense. So, the way that spirituality is expressed in the world is because we open up to it, we allow ourselves to be guided, and then we make the decision to manifest our guidance on the physical plane. And this can be in terms of our behavior, of our action, of our work in the world, of just our conduct, but it's what we put out because that's what we've decided that we're going to do. Again, remember, Virgo, mind on the harvest. So we always have in mind our spiritual path. We have in mind always what's the most effective way that you will be a force for good for humanity, and that becomes the way you conduct yourself. And that often comes against worldly ideas of what the best way forward is. And this is because they are two completely different value systems. So when you have a worldly perspective trying to make sense of spiritual activity, it doesn't work because they're different. They're very, very different. So this is another element of HASTA, is the idea of the taboo, of working outside of a system, working outside of what is acceptable. If you conduct yourself according to spiritual principles, those are different than worldly principles. So people will not understand what you're doing. And when you make a move that is not a worldly move, they will not understand why you made that, and they'll be very suspect of it, but they won't understand you. So if you've ever had somebody say about you, another group, they don't know what to do with you. They don't understand you. This is why. Because you do things that are so different, you're coming from such a different place that there's no way to assimilate you into the group. So you can't be there. It's too uncomfortable. It's too different. So this is another element of HASTA, is the breaking away. I'm talking about professions, families, organizations, networks, like anything that you're part of. Once you become a little too weird, Once you become a little bit too much more than they can accept in the group, they won't have you in the group anymore. So for those of us on a spiritual path, one of the ways that we learn to stay safe is to not say what we are and to not say who we are, and to be very careful about that. And whatever you do with that in your life, at whatever rate you would like to have that information emerge or not, is up to you. But the repercussions are serious. You are discredited, you are ostracized, you are shunned, people lose their jobs. There are serious material consequences to having a spiritual practice that other people don't understand. And this is another element of HASTA, is working outside of a system. What structures are you in that are holding you back? What structures you haven't broken out of them quite yet, but they're never going to allow you to be yourself. They're never going to allow you to be the full expression of what you need to be to do your work in this world. That's what HASTA is looking at. Again, it's your conscious awareness of the material plane and of the metaphysical world. It's your ability, your mastery, what you've developed, what you've worked for, and what you can do because you worked for it, and then always looking forward to the harvest. Why are you doing what you're doing? Who are you, and what are you really about? Leo, Sun, Moon, and Rising. The full moon is happening in your 12th house, and your 12th house is behind the scenes. It's deep psychological healing. It's your house of spirituality, your psychic development. It is your house of spiritual experiences, of dreams, also of escapism. So that's drugs, that's alcohol, prisons, which I hope don't apply to you, rehabilitation centers maybe apply to you. But whatever's going on in your 12th house, this HASTA moon is asking you to clean it up. To clean it up and to look at, in terms of what you're bringing into the world, according to your spiritual path. What harvest are you looking toward? What are you bringing into the world? And what's going on in your subconscious mind? What's going on in your spiritual practices? What's going on in your psychic development? Or if it has to do with escapism, different things that people do with that. Do you have mastery at this point over what's going on in your 12th house so that you can bring into the world what you're supposed to? Now, you're going to get a lot of insight about 12th house with what's going on in your 6th house. And 6th house is your daily routines, your like all the things that are super boring to a Leo, your schedule, your coworkers, right? So it's the mundane life as opposed to the spiritual life, which is the fun part. So from a creative sense, what you're bringing into the world is going to be very dependent on what your spiritual life is looking like, what your dream state is looking like in terms of if it was fitness, what is your spiritual fitness like? And again, that's going to be determined by what's going on in the 6th house, because the 6th house is the boring stuff that happens every day. So it's your actual fitness routines. It's like your actual health. And if the things in the 6th house are wearing you down, it's going to affect what's going on in your 12th house. Because sometimes things are just so boring and they take up so much energy that it's a little bit harder to meditate, or it's a little bit harder to get in sync with your spiritual practices. Or if you need to spend your time on material pursuits, you don't have as much time to practice your metaphysical pursuits. So the balance of these is what HASTA is asking you to look at, right? But very specifically, in terms of what you're bringing into the world, it's shining a light on 12th house, what those practices look like, and asking you really to reconnect with why you like doing them in the first place. And if you're on a spiritual path, which I'm guessing you are if you're going to watch this video, but if you're on a spiritual path, why are you on it in the first place? And the activities that you do and the things that you do, you notice each time when you step away from them, when you come back to them, you know how much you miss them. So the moon is having you look at, stop stepping away, come back, reinvigorate what it is that you like about this stuff. Reinvigorate that divine spark, right? That piece that now that you know what it is, even though you can't explain it to other people who don't know what you're talking about, you would never go back to life without it. That's what it's asking you to reconnect with. Now, there is some structure, 4th house, home, family, origins. So it could be actually your actual physical home, or some way that you have conceived of home, or some limitation when it comes to family of origin, the place you're from. So like actually where you live, or where you've been mentally entrapped or encased in some way or limited in some way. Look for a disruption coming from your 7th house. 7th house has to do with contracts, also committed partnerships, close one-on-one relationships. So there could be, with somebody close to you, some type of disruption in what your home life looks like, or like home life, like behind the scenes stuff. And it could be, disruption could be in a way of you have to rearrange your time, you have to rearrange your situation, you have to rearrange like how you conceive of it, or if you have to break out of the structure, it could also be very liberating, and that you'll have to come up with a new structure. Liberating, terrible, whatever, but also, and going back to what the moon is highlighting, the people who are closest to you and your place of home, your place of rest, your place where you belong and get recharged, it's asking you to look at those structures and reconsider them. Because sometimes, oh God, especially when it comes to family, the structures that we get put in, the structures that we get stuck in, like some people feel really at home around their family, and a lot of people don't feel really good at home around their family. So what's going to happen is that you're going to come face to face with what you can no longer be yourself in, and where the structure has become too limiting, where the container has become too small, and you can't fit there anymore, not if you're going to do your work in the world. So there's going to be some type of disruption. Look from the 7th house, but it will be a disruption with the home. And all of these things, moving back to the moon, all of these things have a relationship with your spiritual life, which is your 12th house. So get back to what excites you. Get back to why you do what you do and who you are in this work. That's what the full moon is having you do. So what is the point of all this? Hasta energy is the duration. What you are doing it because there will one day be a harvest. But that harvest is not today. So in the midst of all of this really difficult work that you're doing, how do you maintain your motivation? Go back to Savitar, the sun, the light, the divine spark that we feel. When you are connected, you know the intangible. In this video, we talked about duality and hasta. That inexplicable thing that unless you've experienced it, you don't understand. Your divine connection, the divine spark. Whereas everything is really getting tired and you are working 6th house like a slave and you're in constant servitude to others and it feels like you have no life and you're bored, even though spiritually you're not supposed to be bored, but still you're bored because it's drudgery. It's like one foot in front of the other. And all of the things that you've given up, it's like they're phantom limbs. You still remember them, but they're not there anymore. So now you actually have this expansive time and nothing fills that time yet. So the lesson of Hasta is to pay attention to the details. In pure Virgo fashion, pay attention to the details. The last moon cycle was about sacrifice. This moon cycle is about spelling. And we think about spelling, we think about witches, many Hasta natives, by the way. The words we use, the way we arrange our items, the things we have around us, the energy that we take it upon ourselves to maintain internally, and then the vibrations that we put out to others. This is all magic. This is all spelling. What you do, what you put out into the world. This is spelling. So clean house, arrange your items, as always. Get rid of what doesn't need to be there anymore. The things that you love, spend more time with them. Enjoy the sensuality of the everyday. Put on your perfume, do your hair and makeup, put on your clothes, enjoy your food, make a nice meal. Take the time to take out your nice dishes. If you're taking a drink, put it into a beautiful glass, the nicest one that you have. Make every moment an occasion. Think of when a friend comes over, how much you clean your space. Well, you're inviting the divine in. Clean your space. Make it someplace you want to share. Reach out to somebody and tell them what a wonderful job they're doing. Do something nice for yourself. If it's available to you, take a night out. Take a dinner out. You're not a slave. You should be enjoying your life. But mainly, because you've cleared all of this energy and Jupiter is going to be bringing blessings into you, enjoy the space just now. Because more is coming, but enjoy the space and appreciate the work that you've done to create that space. So where it seems really boring, before it was a headache, but you got rid of the headache, now it's just boring. boring is going to get replaced with something that you deserve.